I want to start it off. I'm going to help Linda and Karen Starr come up because they're the ones that helped me with the idea of having Mae Timbimboo Parry to be our honored female, our Lady of Women of the Month. There's so many of these things going on right now. So you girls come up, and they're girls, and they're gonna tell you a little bit about what they're doing, and then after that, I'm going to have Linda is going to tell you a story about herself and her experiences, and then we'll have a little more after.
I'll just tell you a little bit about, as part of the American History Committee for DAR, one of the things that they do is present Women in History Awards. These are awards given to outstanding women who have made contributions to their community in a variety of ways. And as we were talking about potential women in our area here to give an award to, Mae Parry was one that we thought of right at the beginning. She has been, like I said, she's been the matriarch of the Shoshone tribe and did so much to preserve their history. And that is part of the history of our area here. And because of her efforts to do that and all of her contributions, not just to the tribe, but to the whole greater community. It's not even just Utah, because it goes even beyond that. So we felt that she was a very deserving recipient of this award.
Brad got this beautiful picture of me, and I wanted to make sure all of you could see it, because this is a beautiful woman.
It is.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Like they said, my name's Linda Watson, and I'm fairly new to Daughters of the American Revolution, but it's my privilege today to give you a little bit of background on Mae Timbimboo Parry, whom we are honoring today, and to introduce you to her, I was going to say son, but it would
Grandson.
be grandson. I feel honored to do this because I have a really close connection to this family. For instance, this book has history of my family, and right in the middle of my mother's history. I thought I had it right on my fingertips. Is a picture and a story of Mae's father. Her father and my father were well acquainted and were good friends. And I'm going to take just 2 minutes to tell you how that came about. It was about 1940 when Mae Timbimboo came quietly into our little world. This is written by my sister. I was 10 years old, my brother Ralph was 6. Our family attended a program at Reese Ballpark in Brigham City, and as it ended, we realized that Ralph was not with the family. Dad's temper rose as we scanned the near empty bleachers, and then on the top row at the far end, we spotted a little blonde kid with a bunch of Indians. Mother and I went to the car and waited until Dad came back, still cussing him. The next morning at daylight, Dad found a car full of Indians waiting in the yard. They said the little Tosapompi hired us. And they came to help pick our fruit. And that relationship continued for about 6 years. They came every year and became very close to my family. close enough that this is part of my family history. And that's not all, because Mae's great-grandfather and my great-grandfather were very, very close friends. This is George Washington Hill, who became a very close relation to the Shoshone tribe in the probably 70s, 80s, along in there. So I feel very honored to honor Mae Timbimboo. She was born in 1919 in Washakie, Utah, and at a young age, I believe she was 8, she was sent to Sherman Institute in Riverside, California, one of several boarding schools set up by the United States government to educate Native American children away from the reservation. Quoting from a Daughters of American Revolution publication, the children were separated from their tribe or reservation in an effort to destroy any sense of tribal identity, as it was thought this would be best to transform their lives. Quoting from Mae's grandson, Darren Parry, that's your father, right?
That's my cousin.
Cousin, okay. Can't keep them all straight. The boarding school system was designed to assimilate Native Americans into the Euro-American culture. Their creed was, kill the Indian to save the child. If she spoke her language or referred to her people or culture in any way, she was punished. Now, the remarkable thing is that that experience did not take away the language, the culture, or the love of her people. After 3 years at the boarding school, she returned to Washakie, where she completed her schooling and graduated from Bear River High School. When she was 12 years old, she began writing down the stories and history she was hearing from the elders, and especially from her grandfather. He had survived the Bear River Massacre by pretending to be dead. And of him, Mae says, he was a person that believed you had to know about your history and your people. Every winter, he'd gather us around and tell us stories, true stories, and also fables and fairy tales and all kinds of stories. Just his language and the things he would say would paint you a picture. This is why Darren Parry says of his grandmother, my grandmother was our storyteller. She was our tribal historian. The title is important to my Native people because it is the job of the tribal historian to carry on our traditions and histories that have been passed down from generations. My grandmother played a crucial role in sharing her history and culture. She always spoke from her heart and was as comfortable talking to children as she was to great leaders. She would bring old stories to life that would captivate any audience. In her adult life, she had many opportunities to influence government leaders regarding Indian affairs. She traveled to Washington, D.C. many times. She met with senators and representatives and other government officials. She served as a representative on the White House Council for Indian Affairs. She was recognized with the Utah Women's Achievement Award in 1986, and Mae won what she considered the best award of all. She was named Utah Honorary Mother of the Year. Not only was she the mother of her own 6 children, she was mother to her tribal family. As Darren says, she was our tribe's matriarch. Now, Brad, if you'll come up. We, as the Daughters of American Revolution, are honored to recognize the achievements of Mae Timbimboo Parry and present you with a certificate and a medal and our deepest respect and admiration for her contributions to the preservation of the history of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Thank you for honoring my grandmother, Mae Timbimboo Parry. I'm just going to refer to her as Grandma because that's easier, because that's all I ever called her. I know that she would be a little embarrassed by this award, to tell you the truth. That's just her nature. She liked to work behind the scenes, and I think anybody who knew her knew that. That picture of her was from when she was working at Hill Air Force Base. It's just one of her profile photos that they had, and I ended up with, and I have it in my house to kind of remember her.
Would it be all right if we passed it around?
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And if you also, wanted to pass the pouch around, she made that for me when I was probably 19 or 20, and kind of going off on my own. She said I needed a medicine bag, and so she made that, and has wanted me to use it, but I've had a hard time using that over the years. No, from the bottom of my heart, my family's, we truly appreciate you all recognizing Grandma. I think what was read about her was very accurate. She had a lot of influence over a lot of people, especially my cousin Darren, who was being quoted from, and our tribal chairman, and I'm currently a tribal councilman as well. We would never have gotten this far without our grandmother, without Grandma Mae. And so when we were kids, she would tell us stories. And some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, I learned a little bit after she passed away, because like I was telling other people, she was my grandmother. It was Grandma. That was, I didn't need to hear about a lot of different things, and she didn't want to share some of the things. She just wanted to be my grandmother. I just tell you a little bit about her name, Mae Timbimboo. Timbimboo means rock rider in Shoshone. So she took that very serious. As was read, she started to write things down at 12 years old. Her name meant a lot to her, the rock writings and the tribal historians. And so she did all that. And we have some of her stuff and some of the things that she wrote. She would listen at the foot of her grandfather, Yeager Timbimboo, who lived through the massacres. And she would tell us that he would take a leaf from the tree and poke holes in it to show her what the teepees looked like after the massacre. And so she learned firsthand knowledge, and she never forgot that. Recently I uncovered a picture of my sister and I when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and my grandmother had taken us to the massacre site and had positioned us in a spot that was special to her, and took our picture and wrote on the back of it a little bit of a story for me to find, now that I'm in my 40s. So she always wanted us to remember who we were and what our history was. She always told me I was an Indian. Before anything else, that's what I was. And so we were grateful for that. Despite some of the things read about the boarding school, she actually really enjoyed school. There were some of those problems with her cutting her hair and speaking her language, but she always wrote, maybe she told me she loved school because she wanted me to go. She wanted me to go to class. And so, but she when she was very young, I think she was 5 or 6, she had wrote a story and had told me a story that she had a young teacher that was stationed at Washakie, and the teacher said whoever could learn, I think it was the alphabet or some numbers or something, could win a box of crayons, probably a pack of 8. And to grandmother, that was the greatest thing in the world. And so she went home and wrote that she studied and studied, and she won those crayons. And she said she kept those crayons for as long as she could, probably 10, 15 years. That's how special education was to her. She received several scholarship offers to University of Utah, Brigham Young, the LDS Business College. For what she wanted to do in life, she chose the LDS Business College. And it came to serve her, as she said, throughout her life. During World War II, her family moved from Washakie to Clearfield to be near Hill Air Force Base. They needed jobs up there. They needed people to fill the jobs, and she became a procurement technician and retired from there. So she spent a good 30-something years there. My grandfather told me once that when they were going to work, because he also worked up there, when they were going to work together, he looked at her and said, "This really isn't work for you, is it? It's more of a vacation." She goes, "I love what I do." And she was happy to go to work every single day. And so she loved the work she did at Hillfield. And after reading those things, I didn't realize how she would have ever found time to do the extracurricular Native American things that we were talking about. Grandmother throughout her life testified before Congress probably 12 different times. She met personally with the Secretary of Interiors and several U.S. presidents in her time. Her main goal in life was to tell her story, to tell our story of the Northwestern Shoshone. When I was young, the Bear River Massacre was called the Battle of Bear River. And there was a little story that went along with it about the brave soldiers that killed 250 Indians at that time. And Grandma, that wasn't her story. She would tell it a different way. And she would tell it the way her grandmother's, about how her great-grandfather Segrich rode out to meet Colonel Connor and try to talk to him before they attacked, and how they were looking for peace, and they weren't ready. They weren't ready for a battle. They weren't ready for a fight. They had no weapons. And so for years it hurt her, and it hurt her to read other people's, what they would say. Recently, going through her things, I saw how strong of a writer she was. I knew what kind of a speaker she was, but writing letters back then, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where people would kind of challenge her account of the Bear River Massacre, and how stern she would write back. And it was a little impressive, and got a little bit insight to myself of, that's why I'm probably like the way I am. Grandma, she wasn't a pushover, and she fought hard. When I was young, 10, 11, she had met before Congress again, and met with Secretary Lujan, who was the Secretary of Interior at the time. And it took an act of Congress to pass the name change from a Battle of Bear River to a Bear River Massacre, and she accomplished that, an actual change in the law of Congress. And so we were able to recognize it as what it truly was. And so that was a big relief for her. That was the starting point. She taught the rest of us, she taught me and my cousins and anybody who would listen about being an Indian. Grandma didn't want to be thanked a whole lot. You said thank you once, and that was about it. Or you would embarrass her and she would get upset. If she gave you something, you took it. A lot of times, oh no, I don't need that, I don't need that. But we learned that if she offers it, you take it and say thank you. She wanted us to realize that we were going to be the next generation carrying this story forward. We believe that the land out there on the massacre site is full of people who have souls that are unrested. And I didn't understand that until I got older and realized that's what my grandmother was trying to do, was bring to rest these souls that were there. And now that we have the ability to do that, I think that these people will be able to come to peace. My whole life I just thought she was, she's talking about Shoshone, she's talking about us, that's awesome, good for her. But it really was about the people that came before her and then the people that came after her. She rarely thought of herself, ever. She was such a unique lady. She would tell me funny stories about when she was a little girl. She said that she would see a lizard and she would run away at lizards and stuff, because her and her sisters knew that if they were caught by the lizard, it would turn into a man and they would have to marry it, is what she told me. And so she said she always did that, and that her grandmother, Jaeger's wife, was very superstitious that way. And so Grandma said they would be poking the fire with sticks, and her grandmother would say, no, we don't want rain this time of year, and she said her back would be turned and they'd be poking it, and her grandmother would take them and they would have to put their hands in the ash and wash them and do different things so they wouldn't get rain at that time of year, is what they believed. When I was in high school I played a lot of high school sports, and I was needing my luck to change around. She made me put my moccasins on the wrong side of the foot. She told me that was the way that the bears wore them. She didn't tell me that if I did that, a bear would come to my house. She just told me that my luck would change. Luckily, a bear didn't come to my house, but when I found out that's what would happen after, I was a little nervous. But those are some of the things Grandma would tell us, and then she would just be our grandmother. I don't know really what else to say about her. To give you kind of an idea of who she was and how I saw her and how my family saw her, I'll tell you a story that my father told at her funeral. I was a senior in high school, and I had a football game that night. And Grandma lived right across the street from the high school that we all attended. And so often we went over there for lunch. I would go over there on a game day and take a nap, have her wake me up, time to go to the game. And I went over there, and my aunt was there, and she was making lunch. And where's Grandma? I don't know. She called me and told me to come and get this started for you. Oh, okay. And Grandma happened to come walking in a few minutes later, and she was in her full dress, just beads, and my grandfather was in his suit. And I just, this is 1996, and so I was like, well, where were you? How come you look so fancy? She said, oh, the president stopped in town and needed to meet with me, so I ran up there. But I had to get back because you were coming over for lunch. And it took me a minute, and I just said, no, what? You've got to explain that. She goes, yeah, President Clinton. Yes, he came in, needed to talk to me, but I was like, hey, I've got to go. And so she left. And she left and made sure that she saw me before I went to my football game. That was my grandmother. I had talked to several family members afterwards. I said, did you know Grandma met with President today? And they were, which president? I'm like, ours, in the United States. Like, he flew in and she went and met him. Oh, how did you find out? Well, because she cut it short to come back and see me. And it was, nobody knew. She didn't tell anybody that she was going there to meet with the president. She wasn't going to tell anybody afterwards either. I just happened to be there. And my aunt happened to be there, who told the story to my parents, who, after the game, they're like, she really? And I'm like, yeah, she really did. So, that was my grandmother. Grandma, I loved listening to her stories. I loved reading her writings. Everything that we do, me and my cousins do now, is in honor of her. I can't thank you enough for this. She truly was a remarkable woman. She would talk about the long trips to California, and I wouldn't have wanted to go to boarding school. And she wrote with it with such upbeat passion that I kind of felt like I missed out a little bit. I probably didn't, but that's just the way she wrote. She had such a good positive outlook on everything. And she loved her family. She loved her friends. If you knew Mae, if you knew Grandma, then she loved you. You get to be older and she passes away, and you look back and you think, why did I spend every waking second with her? When I was a kid, I would sit there and watch her bead. And she did a beautiful buffalo bag that she beaded and sold to the state of Utah. And I watched her bead that whole thing over a couple of years, and one day it was just gone. And I was like, where'd that go? Oh, someone came and got it. It just didn't matter to her. She was more about her family and her people. And I think a lot of that comes from Moroni and Yeager. As you were talking about your grandfather, George Washington Hill, big part of our life, big part of our Shoshone life. Baptized the whole tribe in 2 days into the LDS Church. Sometimes Grandma would tell me that they had to baptize somebody 2 or 3 times because the other Indians would say, well, he's been pretty bad. And to Missionary Hill's, to his credit, he knew not to fight it. Just all right, and just went along with that. And so, just certain things like that, that my grandmother would teach us. But I think the biggest thing she wanted me to know was that she loved me, and for me to love everybody else too. She always told me to answer the door with food, to bring people in, to find out who they are first. Don't just tell people who I am, but find out who they are. They have a cool story. She loved being a Native American. She loved it. Her grandchildren loved it. She is truly one of the most special people. I still don't know if I know a tenth of what she actually accomplished in her life, because she didn't want the praise. She just was that type of woman, but very funny. She would tell me funny things like I just told you, but I don't know is there any questions or you would like?
Where did you say she was raised?
She was raised in Washakie.
Where is that?
It's about 40 minutes north of here in Plymouth.
Oh, I know where Plymouth.
Yeah, it's right out there in Plymouth, the Portage area.
Oh, okay.
There used to be a little town site there. After the massacre, the Indians needed a place to go. We called upon Brigham Young. Brigham Young sent us to a church farm, an LDS church farm there. And we just started to establish it. That's actually where she met my grandfather, Grant Parry. They grew up together. They were the same age, went through the same schools together. So we just say that we're half Welsh, half Indian.
Your grandfather was not Indian.
No, my grandfather was full Welsh, but he probably spoke Shoshone as well as anybody.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, he spoke it very well. He knew all the customs. He never told me about how his ancestors came over, only Indian stuff. That's how he was raised, so, yeah.
How was Shirley Timbimboo related to you?
Shirley, I don't know. I'll have to look.
You need to.
Okay.
The Roy Museum used to have a very large painting of her.
Of Shirley, all right.
And a smaller one, a Moroni.
Okay,
And several of the girls came in one day to see because they had heard that there was a large one of Moroni that we should have had.
yeah.
And I was the president at the time, and I'd never seen the large one.
Patty, do you know Shirley? There was a picture of Mae and Frank, yeah. And then Amy might have been up there. Her mother was named Amy Timbimboo. Amy Huchu Timbimboo, means bird. But yeah, so she was raised on a town site there. The town site's no longer there. We want to acquire it back. But
I just didn't know where that
it
was.
was called Washakie.
So it was Washakie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little Washakie reservation. It was called the Washakie town site back then. We named it after Chief Washakie because there are several bands of Shoshone, Northwestern, Eastern, Shoshone-Bannock, and even not a lot of people know this, but the Comanche are also Shoshone. We speak the same language and have the same customs. We split apart when smallpox affected us. We got away from each other so we wouldn't die out from smallpox. But if we had one leader to look back on at that time that could get all the chiefs on the same page, it was Washakie. So that's why it was named that. So.
Did you say she worked at procurement at Hillfield?
Yes, ma'am.
Because my dad was director of procurement, and I know that he really pushed to hire women and minorities.
Yeah.
Like in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
did she retire?
She probably started working there in the 40s during World War II,
Yeah. Well,
but she would have been there during the 60s and 70s, absolutely.
I bet she worked for my dad.
Probably.
World.
She loved it.
When did she retire?
Early 80s, late 70s. Yeah, she.
Sounded really familiar. I know that I heard something about her.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't know she had so much time to work because when I knew her, it was Washington, D.C. one weekend, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, wherever they needed her. You know, she was at a powwow or something, Fort Hall. So I don't know how she had time to work.
She was a good ambassador for the
She was.
Indians and for the Americans.
She does. And she, and she always taught us
Yes.
that, yeah, it's great to be Shoshone, it's great to be Indian, but you're a person first. You know, there are people around you. Include them. Be inclusive. And so, and I think my friends, if they were here, would speak to this, is she never had a problem with any one of us just going over there, me and my friends. She accepted all of us, and whoever they were.
She be everywhere, but it's
Yeah.
not yet.
Yeah. So you were right. She was a great ambassador for those types of things.
So at tribal gatherings of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
was she honored? Was she brought in as one of the dignitaries was she very retiring?
Indian culture is very unique. I'll put it that way. When Grandma got to be very, very much older in her 80s, and she passed away at 89, and she started to retire from some of those things. She was blessed as an elder. She was held in very high esteem and reverence wherever she went. When she was younger and we started having our first tribal councils, she was just like she could get yelled at just like everybody else, and she would give it right back. Indians don't get along with each other in a meeting, so. And I remember going to those meetings and thinking, I will never do that. And then I've been on for the last 5 years, so that was because of her. But she changed a lot of things that way. But it took a long time for people to recognize in our own tribe who she was. Other people did. When I was at the University of Utah, and I would tell people who I was. Mae, yeah, and then I would be ushered around every time there was a powwow. I met every important person that was supposed to be there and was introduced as Mae's grandson, and they all knew her. And I'm just like, oh, okay, and thank you, sir, and I like your book. Tell my teacher to give me an A. And so, she did a lot of those types of things, but I was just blown away by the number of people that she knew. So I thank you again. I can't express my appreciation enough. So thank you all. I hope you have a great time.
Okay, stay up here.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Brad, that was amazing.
Thank you.
And your grandmother was amazing. So
Yeah.
thank
She
you
was.
for
Thank
sharing
you.
those stories.
Absolutely.
And I feel like we've got a real insight into the life of Mae. And I just love the extended generation and how you all respected her, and that is amazing. So I'm going to have Ruth
Present you with a check
Oh, thank you.
for the Shoshone.
in
Oh,
honor of your grandmother.
Thank you.
And just use it however
Yeah.
you feel.
this will be put to good use. As we've talked about, we are building an interpretive site museum
Oh,
in Preston, Idaho.
Yeah, we've been to the site.
We've been there.
We've been
Yeah,
there.
okay. Yeah, Darren took you out there.
Yeah.
And so this will go to all of that.
oh, that's
that's
good.
To help store some of our grandmother's things there.
Oh,
I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Does-
How are you doing with that site?
Do- Very well.
Are you?
We're on schedule. If you talk to anybody that has a lot of money, though, tell them we still need a few dollars. Right now I'm actually project manager. I left my job. I was a 20-year federal employee. Left my job last week to work on this.
Wow.
I worked for BOR, Bureau of Reclamation, in Salt Lake. So I did water projects. So the tribe found out I could handle some of the construction stuff. And next thing I know, my father was saying, well, your grandmother worked for 80 years and a few years of my life was
So good.
was nothing to give up for her dream. But no, we appreciate this every little bit. We're on schedule. We hope to be under construction, actually building the site in August of next year, so August of 2020. So